Hello, I'm Alex, and today I'm sharing a story that isn't just about love or family, it's about betrayal, expectations, and the weight of the past. This is the story of Charlotte Hayes, a woman who spent her entire life chasing perfection, believing that success would protect her from pain. A brilliant surgeon, a devoted daughter, the ideal bride, she had done everything right. But on the day that was supposed to mark the beginning of her perfect future, the cracks in her family's fragile foundation shattered beyond repair. The message of this story is clear: forgiveness isn't always about making peace with others, it's about freeing yourself. Charlotte learns that strength isn't in holding on but in knowing when to walk away. Because sometimes, the only way to move forward is to leave behind the people who refuse to grow with you. The soft glow of morning light streamed through the towering windows of the peninsula, Chicago, casting golden streaks across the mirror where Charlotte Hayes sat, frozen in thought. The makeup artist dusted the final stroke of highlighter across her cheekbone, her voice steady yet gentle. "Chin up just a little, Charlotte." She obeyed, but the tension in her shoulders remained. This wasn't nerves, this was something else. A feeling deep in her gut, cold and unshakable. At 38 years old, Charlotte had built a life people envied. A highly accomplished pediatric surgeon, she had spent her entire youth clawing her way up the ranks, sacrificing friendships, holidays, even love, for a future that was supposed to be worth it. And today was meant to be the final piece of that puzzle, her wedding day. The moment she stepped into the life she had fought so hard to create. Yet, beneath the expensive silk of her custom Dior gown, something felt off. Her mother, Margaret Hayes, was beside her, smoothing the fabric with practiced precision, just as she had smoothed out every wrinkle in Charlotte's life, whether Charlotte wanted her to or not. Across the suite, her younger sister, Olivia, 30, lounged on the cream velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone. Olivia was the opposite of Charlotte in every way. Where Charlotte had spent her life chasing perfection, Olivia had embraced chaos. Where Charlotte had earned admiration, Olivia had demanded attention. She was effortlessly beautiful, her honey blonde waves catching the morning sun like a model in an editorial spread, her champagne-colored bridesmaid dress clinging to her like a second skin. "Olivia, are you okay?" Charlotte asked, keeping her voice light. Olivia looked up, a slow, almost lazy smile curving her lips. "Yeah, just texting a friend." A lie. Charlotte knew it. Felt it. In the way Olivia's fingers twitched around the phone, the restless way she crossed and uncrossed her legs. But their mother didn't seem to notice, she never did. Margaret had spent a lifetime excusing Olivia's impulsiveness, as if it were merely an amusing personality trait rather than a warning sign. Charlotte exhaled, forcing herself to let it go. This was her day. She wouldn't let Olivia, of all people, ruin it. Yet, deep down, she knew, Olivia wasn't just distracted. She was waiting. Waiting for something to happen. Or worse, waiting to make it happen. Charlotte Hayes had always been the golden child, the one who never failed. She had understood from a young age that in the Hayes family, love wasn't freely given, it was earned. And perfection was the price. While other kids spent their summers at the lake or chasing fireflies, Charlotte sat at their father's desk, flipping through medical textbooks, memorizing anatomical terms before she even hit middle school. Every time she mastered a new concept, her father, Dr. Charles Hayes, would give a small nod of approval, silent, measured, never excessive. Affection, in their home, was not a right but a privilege. She learned to thrive under pressure, her identity shaped by expectations sharper than any surgical scalpel. Straight A's. Ivy League. Med school. Residency. A record-breaking promotion. Each accomplishment was a brick in the fortress she had built around herself, a fortress that no one, not even her sister Olivia, could break through. But Olivia had never wanted to be inside. Where Charlotte had been groomed for excellence, Olivia was left to fend for herself. She was beautiful, wild, a firework against the night sky, a spectacle but never the main event. Their mother, Margaret Hayes, had always brushed off her daughter's failures with an indulgent laugh. "She's just finding herself, Charles." But time passed, and Olivia never quite found anything. When Charlotte had landed a prestigious fellowship, Olivia had dropped out of college. When Charlotte became the youngest attending pediatric surgeon at her hospital, Olivia was working temp jobs and dating wealthy men who never stayed. And with each of Charlotte's victories, Olivia's resentment grew. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was there, lurking beneath every forced smile, every offhand comment, every lingering glance. Charlotte first saw it the night she got into Harvard Medical School. Their father, a man who rarely showed emotion, had pulled her into an uncharacteristic hug. "You did it, Charlotte. You're going to change the world." She remembered the way Olivia had stood at the edge of the room, clutching a glass of wine she wasn't old enough to drink, her lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. She hadn't congratulated her. Hadn't even looked at her. Instead, she had walked out of the room, closing the door a little too hard behind her. That was the first crack. Now, sitting in her bridal suite on the biggest day of her life, Charlotte could still feel the weight of that night pressing down on her. She glanced across the room. Olivia was still on her phone, her fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "Are you sure you're okay?" Charlotte asked, softer this time. For a brief second, Olivia hesitated before looking up. Then, the same lazy, too perfect smile spread across her lips. "I told you, I'm fine. Today is about you." But Charlotte knew her sister too well. That wasn't reassurance. That was a warning. Charlotte turned toward the mirror, forcing herself to focus on the reflection staring back at her. The woman in the glass was composed, elegant, in control. She had built her life with precision, brick by brick. She refused to believe that Olivia could still tear it down. The heavy doors of St. Michael's Cathedral creaked open, flooding the aisle with golden morning light. A hush swept through the pews as all eyes turned to Charlotte Hayes, standing at the threshold in a gown of pristine ivory silk. The picture of grace, of control, of everything she had spent a lifetime curating. Her fingers curled around her father's arm. Dr. Charles Hayes, ever composed, held himself with an air of quiet authority. His grip was firm, but beneath the surface, Charlotte could sense something, a rare hesitation, a fleeting crack in his usual unshakable presence. "Are you ready?" His voice was gruff, yet softer than usual. Charlotte nodded, swallowing hard. She should have been. Everything about this day had been meticulously planned, the venue, the guest list, the floral arrangements curated down to the last white rose. She had built this moment with the same precision she applied in the operating room, as if perfect execution could guarantee perfect outcomes. But somewhere in the sea of elegantly dressed guests, Olivia sat, her champagne-colored bridesmaid dress shimmering beneath the cathedral's stained-glass light, her fingers still wrapped around that damn phone. And Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that her sister was waiting for something. 3 years ago, Charlotte met James Calloway in a cold, windowless conference room at Chicago General Hospital, a routine malpractice review, just another meeting in an endless stream of bureaucratic red tape. But when he walked in, something shifted. James was the kind of man who commanded attention without ever raising his voice, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with a presence both effortless and undeniable. A sharp navy suit that fit a little too well. A gaze that cut straight through the noise. "Dr. Hayes, if you could review these files." His voice had been smooth, steady, lacking the arrogance she had come to expect from attorneys. Charlotte had been bracing for a fight. Instead, she found someone who listened. Week after week, their professional interactions stretched past the meeting rooms, turning into coffee breaks, then late-night emails, then conversations that lasted longer than they should have. Until one evening, in a quiet bistro tucked away from the chaos of downtown Chicago, he leaned in and said, "A doctor and a lawyer. An unusual pairing, don't you think?" Charlotte had smiled. Not really. Both professions help people, just in different ways. She hadn't realized then that she was already falling for him. But Olivia had noticed. And something inside her sister had shifted. Charlotte walked the aisle with slow, measured steps, the cathedral's crimson runner stretching before her like a path toward the future she had worked so relentlessly to build. 200 guests watched, their expressions a mix of admiration and expectation. At the altar, James stood tall in his deep charcoal tuxedo, his posture confident, his expression that same steady presence she had fallen in love with. And for the briefest moment, the tension in Charlotte's chest loosened. Until she saw Olivia. Seated in the second row, her lips curved into a too-perfect smile. Charlotte knew that smile. It was the same one Olivia had worn when she had failed a test in high school and pretended she didn't care. The same one she had when their father forgot her birthday but took Charlotte out to dinner to celebrate her latest accomplishment. The same one she had the night Charlotte told her she was engaged. Wow. You and James. Didn't see that coming. That was all she had said. No excitement. No congratulations. Just that smile. And now, as Charlotte placed her hands in James's, that same smile lingered on Olivia's lips. Something was coming. Charlotte could feel it. But not even she was prepared for how fast her perfect world was about to shatter. The gold room at the Peninsula Chicago was bathed in warm golden light, the chandeliers casting intricate patterns across the polished marble floor. The scent of white roses and candle wax filled the air as the soft hum of polite conversation blended with the clinking of fine crystal. Seated at the head table, Charlotte Hayes tried to exhale the tension that had been gathering in her chest since the morning. Across from her, James Calloway, her new husband, offered a reassuring squeeze of her hand beneath the table. A silent reminder, it's over. We made it. We're here. But the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. Not with Olivia sitting just a few seats away, her fingers curled around the stem of a champagne flute, her posture a little too poised, her smile a little too rehearsed. And then, Olivia stood. The chatter died down instantly. May I say something? She asked, her voice carrying through the elegant ballroom. Charlotte's spine stiffened. James's grip on her hand turned firm. The room held its breath. Olivia smiled, a slow, deliberate stretch of lips. The kind of smile that said this wasn't kindness. This was calculated. Tonight, we celebrate Charlotte and James, the perfect couple. A doctor and a lawyer, the dream team, the ones who always do everything right. A soft chuckle rippled through the crowd. But Olivia's eyes never left Charlotte. My sister has always been exceptional. She drew out the last word, tasting it like something bitter. Charlotte's nails dug into the linen napkin on her lap. She excelled in school. She became the perfect daughter. The one who could do no wrong. The one our father loved the most. A pause. A carefully placed silence. A few guests exchanged glances, sensing the shift in tone. Margaret Hayes, seated near the front, visibly tensed, her fingers tightening around her pearl necklace. Dr. Charles Hayes sat stone-faced, but his jaw twitched, the only tell that he knew exactly where this was going. But tonight's not about me, Olivia continued, swirling the champagne in her glass. It's about Charlotte and the man she chose. Her gaze flicked to James. Charlotte's stomach plummeted. And I think it's only fair that everyone gets to know him a little better. Charlotte shook her head imperceptibly, a silent warning, a desperate plea. But Olivia was already turning toward the projector screen at the front of the room. And then, the first image appeared. A low murmur spread through the room like wildfire. The screen flickered, displaying a series of text messages. Messages that should not have existed. Messages from Olivia to James. The first one, a casual invitation for drinks. The next, a flirtation, veiled but unmistakable. Then, a question that sent ice through Charlotte's veins. What if we kept this between us? Gasps rippled through the guests, some turning toward James, others toward Charlotte. James stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Turn it off," he ordered, his voice low, firm. Olivia merely raised a brow. "Why?" she asked innocently. "Something you don't want your wife to see?" Charlotte felt the world shift beneath her, the entire ballroom warping into something smaller, suffocating. The texts continued flashing across the screen. James's replies were polite but clear, rejecting Olivia at every turn. "This is inappropriate, Olivia. I love Charlotte. This stops now. Do not contact me again." But that wasn't the point, was it? It wasn't about what he had said. It was about what Olivia had tried to do. And about the fact that she had chosen this moment to expose it. Charlotte's hands trembled against the tablecloth. She turned to Olivia, her sister, her own blood. "Why?" The question barely left her lips, a whisper lost in the noise of the murmuring crowd. Olivia tilted her head, the light catching the sharp angles of her face. "Because," she said simply, "I wanted to see if I could take something from you for once." A hush fell over the room. A silence so thick it was deafening. Margaret gasped audibly, her hands flying to her mouth. Charles Hayes, the man who had raised them both, closed his eyes tightly, as if blocking out the reality of the moment. James, standing motionless, watched Charlotte. Not Olivia. Not the guests. Just Charlotte. Because only her reaction mattered. Charlotte slowly rose to her feet. She should have screamed. Should have cried. Should have lashed out. But instead, she simply breathed. Her father had conditioned her for composure. Her career had trained her for control. Her life had prepared her for moments just like this. So she let go of her napkin. She let go of the breath she had been holding. And she let go of Olivia. "We're done," Charlotte said, her voice steady, final. Something flickered in Olivia's eyes, shock, maybe. Or regret. But it was too late. Charlotte turned to James. "Let's go." And for the first time that night, the entire room erupted into applause. Not for Olivia. Not for drama. For Charlotte. For the woman who had just survived her sister's worst betrayal, and walked away standing taller than ever. The Gold Room at the Peninsula Chicago was eerily quiet. The clinking of glasses had stopped, the hushed murmurs had faded. The moment Olivia's betrayal had been laid bare, it was as if the entire room had stopped breathing. Charlotte Hayes stood motionless at the head table, her hands resting on the crisp white linen, her heartbeat steady despite the storm raging inside her. Across from her, Olivia sat rigid, the spotlight she had once thrived under now burning her alive. For the first time in their lives, Olivia was the one being judged. Their mother, Margaret Hayes, had paled considerably, her fingers clutching the pearls around her throat as if they were the only thing keeping her from crumbling. Their father, Dr. Charles Hayes, the ever-imposing patriarch, sat frozen, his hands folded, his jaw clenched so tightly that Charlotte could almost hear his teeth grinding. And James, her husband, stood beside her, unwavering. That should have been a comfort. But it wasn't. Because no matter how many ways she replayed the night in her head, one question refused to be ignored. How did we even get here? I hate you. The words were barely a whisper, but in the suffocating silence, they cut deeper than a scream. Olivia's hands trembled around her champagne glass, her manicured nails digging into the delicate crystal as if she could somehow hold herself together through sheer force of will. You always had everything, Charlotte. Her voice wavered, but her eyes burned with something raw and unforgiving. Dad's approval. Mom's attention. Their love. She swallowed hard, her shoulders quaking. Just once, I wanted something that belonged to you. Charlotte should have felt anger, outrage, disgust. But all she felt was exhaustion. Because deep down, she had always known. It had always been there, the silent war between them. The battle Olivia had been fighting alone, while Charlotte had spent years pretending it didn't exist. "You think I had it easy?" Charlotte's voice was calm, but it carried an edge Olivia had never heard before. She took a step closer, lowering her voice so that only her sister could hear. "Do you know what it's like to be expected to be perfect? To never be allowed to fail? To have love given on conditions?" She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "You resented me for winning a race I never even wanted to run." Olivia's breath hitched. For the first time that night, her defiance cracked. But Charlotte wasn't done. "And now?" She gestured to the ballroom, to the stunned faces watching them. "You've lost the only thing you had left, your dignity." The words landed like a final blow. Olivia's eyes glossed over, her chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. She looked away, her fingers unclenching from the glass, letting it rest, forgotten, on the table. For the first time in their lives, she had nothing left to say. Charlotte didn't stay to watch her sister crumble. She turned, her head held high, and walked back to James. He was still there, still hers, still steady. But something between them had shifted. As she reached for his hand, she hesitated. And for the first time, so did he. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, a delay only she would notice. But it was there. And suddenly, she realized something. Tonight wasn't just about Olivia's betrayal. It was about all the ways James hadn't told her the truth. Because if he had really been upfront, if he had really wanted to protect their relationship, why hadn't she heard it from him first? The doubt settled like a weight in her chest. Not enough to destroy them. Not yet. But enough to make her wonder. And for someone like Charlotte, who built her entire life on certainty. That was terrifying. By the time the night ended, the ballroom had emptied out. Her parents left in humiliated silence, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Olivia was nowhere to be seen. James had made small talk, spoken to guests, acted as if the night hadn't collapsed around them. But Charlotte? She stood at the entrance of the hotel, watching the city lights flicker against the dark Chicago skyline. James approached her, slipping his jacket over her shoulders, pressing a light kiss to her temple. "Are you okay?" he asked. She almost laughed. "I don't know." Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she was. She had survived the night. She had survived Olivia. But something inside her had changed. And as she stepped into the limousine, as the doors closed behind her, as the car pulled away from the hotel, she realized she wasn't just leaving behind a ruined evening. She was leaving behind who she used to be. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. The seasons changed, and with them, so did Charlotte Hayes. It had been a year since the night that shattered the illusion of family, since she stood in that ballroom, watching her sister burn the last bridge between them. A year since she realized that perfection had never been protection. Now, on a quiet winter morning, Charlotte sat at the kitchen counter of their Chicago brownstone, watching as James flipped pancakes, his usual Sunday ritual. The scent of fresh coffee and butter lingered in the air, wrapping around them like something familiar, something safe. "Our anniversary is next weekend," James said, turning to her with an easy smile. Charlotte nodded but didn't answer right away. Because something had shifted between them, not in a way that was obvious, not in a way that broke them, but in a way that left hairline fractures beneath the surface. They had survived Olivia's betrayal. But survival and healing weren't the same thing. Outside, snow blanketed the city in quiet white, the world momentarily untouched, as if the past year hadn't happened. But it had. Because in the drawer of their bedroom, tucked between old letters and forgotten keepsakes, sat an envelope from Olivia. A letter Charlotte had read too many times but never answered. "I'm sorry." 2 simple words. And yet, they carried the weight of an entire lifetime. James leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "Are you okay?" he asked. Charlotte let out a slow breath. "I think so. Because forgiveness wasn't a door you walked through. It was a road you traveled, sometimes alone, sometimes with the people who chose to stay. And for now, that was enough." At its core, this story is about the weight of expectations, the cost of resentment, and the power of choosing oneself. It is a testament to how the past, whether shaped by family, rivalry, or unspoken wounds, can define a person, but only if they allow it to. Charlotte spent her life believing perfection equaled love, that success could shield her from pain. But no amount of achievement could protect her from betrayal, just as no amount of control could prevent the truth from surfacing. Her journey is one of reckoning, not just with Olivia's actions, but with the illusions she built to survive. The story also forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth: forgiveness is not always about reconciliation. Sometimes, it is about letting go of the need for closure, for validation, for answers that may never come. Charlotte doesn't forgive Olivia out of obligation, she does it for herself, because carrying resentment is its own kind of prison. In the end, this is a story about survival, not just of the body, but of the spirit. It reminds us that true strength isn't found in holding on. It's in knowing when to walk away.